Rightio team, so there are two motorcycles in the sub 500cc category that in 2024 you have to compare to each other, and that is of course the CFMOTO 450MT, or Ibex 450 as it's known in the States, and the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. Now, I've been really lucky to have ridden both of these bikes. I rode the Himalayan at the international launch in Manali, India, which was brilliant. And I've also had the CFMOTO 450MT on a loan here in New Zealand and ridden it around my backyard. So I'm reasonably familiar with both of these bikes. I've got some good miles under my belt, and I just wanted to compare the two because when it comes to pricing, spec, and generally design, these bikes, while different in some significant respects, they do compete for the same user. So if you're cross-shopping, looking at whether or not to spend your 10 grand on a CFMOTO or a Royal Enfield, continue watching, because I'm going to cover off what I think are the pros and cons of each, and where I think you should probably spend your money. So kicking things off, the CFMOTO has a 450cc parallel twin engine, where the Royal Enfield Himalayan has a single cylinder unit. It's about 452ccs from memory. Both put out roughly the same horsepower at about 40 horsepower, same amount of torque. So in terms of sheer power, you're basically on par. Where these bikes differ is how they deliver that power and the feeling you get while riding them. So if I had to give a clear winner here, it would have to be the CFMOTO straight out of the gate, because that parallel twin engine is just so much more characterful than the Royal Enfield single. And that's not saying the Royal Enfield engine isn't a bad engine. I'm just saying that if I'm twisting the throttle and I hear that 270-degree crank and that phenomenal exhaust noise from the CFMOTO, it makes you feel a bit more involved in the riding experience than the more quieter engine from the Royal Enfield. On the flip side, if you want a more quieter bike, you want something that sounds a bit more docile, doesn't really draw attention to yourself, you might actually want yourself on the Himalayan 450, because you're not losing out on performance, but you are sort of a little bit more under the radar because that engine note is a lot more subdued. Now, when it comes to suspension, that's where things get a little bit tricky here. So both bikes, I had no problems with the suspension at all when I rode them. The CFMOTO has adjustable suspension front and rear. It's KYB supplied, where the Royal Enfield, I believe, has Showa suspension. Now, the Royal Enfield doesn't have a adjustment in the front fork, but honestly, riding it through the rough as guts roads in India, I didn't have any complaints about that suspension. In fact, I thought that was brilliantly sprung for someone of my hefty weight. I weigh about 105 kilos, give or take, depending on how many pies I've had in the day. And that Royal Enfield suspension, while not adjustable, which a lot of people go, oh, you got to get an adjustable suspension, honestly, it is brilliant for what it's designed to do. You do have more adjustment with the CFMOTO, which means you can tailor it for specific rides if you know what you're doing, but let's face it, most people set the clickers and either leave them or they don't touch them at all, especially if you are a beginner, you don't know what you're doing. You can actually do more harm than good by fiddling around with those clickers. You can make the bike a lot worse handling rather than improving it. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of accessibility, again, this is one where straight out the gate, the CFMOTO does have an edge over the Royal Enfield. It's got a lower seat height of about 820 millimeters or thereabouts, and it has a very narrow subframe, which means the standover for this bike is just a little bit better. So I can actually fully flat foot the CFMOTO at its standard seat height. I have a 30-inch inseam, so not particularly long in the leg here, and I can completely flat foot it wearing my adventure boots. The Royal Enfield has an adjustable seat, however, so you can tailor it up or down a little bit, and it is still quite easy to get on. And in terms of long-term comfort, I think the Royal Enfield might have a slightly more comfortable seat because it flares out a bit more at the back. So for long-term touring, more miles with your bum on the seat, I think the Royal Enfield might have an edge there. Riding position, both are brilliant. You're open and upright. The Royal Enfield does not have an adjustable windscreen, which is a bit of a downer. If you want to have better wind protection, you're going to need to invest in an aftermarket screen. The CFMOTO has possibly the best windscreen I've ever used. It's adjustable, you just have a hand crank and you twist it up or down, and that will sort of either give you a bit of wind blast to the face, or in my case, I'm 176 centimeters tall, 5'8" or 9, complete clear bubble of air. So yeah, it sounds a lot like I'm sort of leaning heavily towards the CFMOTO, but when it comes to styling, that's where you got to go all in on the Royal Enfield, in my opinion, because, like it or not, yeah, modern styling just doesn't do it for me. Might do it for you, but if it was my choice, if I had to look at the bike every day, I'd be going for the Royal Enfield Himalayan. That beautiful big LED circular headlight, that nice circular TFT screen. It just seems, overall design-wise, aesthetically pleasing. If you're wanting a bike that's more aesthetically pleasing, the Royal Enfield hands down is the better looking motorcycle. The modern alien kind of cyclopsy look that the CFMOTO is going on, it's more a utilitarian design rather than a design that will inspire you to just look back and go, yeah, that's my motorcycle. Or sitting in a cafe looking at the bike covered in mud. I'd rather be looking at the Royal Enfield, to be honest. For your money though, you really can't go wrong with either of those bikes. There is one area as well where the Royal Enfield completely blows the CFMOTO out of the water, and that is rider community. So if you've already got a group of buddies and you go adventure riding, you don't want to make friends, you've got enough already, feel free to go to the CFMOTO. But if you want to join a motorcycle brand that has a thriving community, you can't go past the Royal Enfield. The Royal Enfield community is quite possibly, next to Harley Davidson, the next biggest, if not the biggest, motorcycle community in the world. They have plenty of activations, friendly dealers, friendly clubs, and they have lots of rides and meetups to go to. They have the yearly one ride that they try and get everyone out on every year, get Royal Enfields to ride on one single day. It's a brand that sort of inspires a bit more love for the brand because of what they activate. Whereas CFMOTO, it's still a growing brand. It doesn't have the heritage that Royal Enfield has. So Royal Enfield's one of the original motorcycle brands. CFMOTO is the same age as me. It came out in 1989. So you got 35, 36 years of development and brand there versus over 100 for Royal Enfield. So if you're going for one or the other, if you want that thriving community and that group, like the group hug, really, that's Royal Enfield. It's a group hug versus, unfortunately, with CFMOTO being Chinese, you get a lot of people turning their noses up to you, and honestly, it's their loss, but that is something that you're going to have to deal with, that conversation on a regular basis. So if I was to buy one of these bikes, they're both under $10,000. From a purely aesthetic point of view, I would be going with the Royal Enfield Himalayan. If I was having a bike to travel the world, to mess around on, have a bit of fun, to drop regularly, the Royal Enfield just seems a bit more tougher than the CFMOTO. But if I was buying a bike purely to have fun, make some noise, do some skids, I'd be going for the CFMOTO, because the noise when you twist the throttle is quite intoxicating, really. And it is a very fun bike for its price point. It's well designed, and yeah, you can't go wrong with either. So I've probably just muddied the waters a bit more with this video, but let me know, which bike would you choose between the Royal Enfield or the CFMOTO? I'd love to know your opinion. Get them down in the comment section below.